Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lockdown Dads. This is episode number 2. My name's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, and I'm also the father of 2 children. I've got a daughter who's 10 and a son who's 7.
I'm James Miller, author of Dads Don't Babysit, editor of workingdads.co.uk, and father of 2 different children who are aged 12 and 9. And each week we hope to bring you an interesting, relevant, sometimes provocative, perhaps, conversation, mainly relevant to your life as a lockdown dad, because this is a rather odd situation we're all in. And to the end, this week we have got our very first guest. For guest number 1, we obviously went for the nation's number 1. He is the nation's number 1 dad blogger. Actual fact. It's John Adams. Hello, John.
Hello. What do I say with that introduction? Yes.
You say, yes, I am. You go, yes, I am
well,
the number 1.
I do indeed have the Online Influence Award, the best UK dad blog, but possibly more importantly, I am dad to Helen and Izzy, aged 11 and 7 respectively, who are in the corner over the room and who will undoubtedly interrupt at some point.
Well, it's not a proper Zoom call unless a child interrupts these days. That is actual law. We start this thing with the same question, which has become from sort of small talk to far more loaded in these current times. In terms of whether that's mental health or physical health or generally what's going on. How are you, John?
Yeah, I have to say, compared to a lot of people, actually, I think we're doing pretty well. I mean, I'm okay. I suppose, like most people, I'm just slightly institutionalized to this way of life now. We're blessed. We're lucky. None of us has actually gone down with COVID-19. Well, there's a bit of a question mark over that, whether we did at the very beginning, but there were no tests available. Yeah, I mean, I'm missing being able to actually meet up with friends and family, but I'm actually more surprised about what I'm not missing, oddly. As regards to kids, I mean, sleep's been a bit disturbed, and I think that's just to be expected. I mean, I think we're all feeling it, and that's just the way it's manifesting itself with our 2.
It's lack of exercise as well, isn't it? I was saying that to my daughter today, but she's not sleeping great because you're only doing you do one bit of exercise a day. Usually you'd be, walking to school and back, running around the playground, all that sort of nonsense.
Well, it's true. I mean, we haven't got the biggest garden actually in our old house.
We would otherwise, in terms of
yeah, we just left the kids out there all day. But it is a bit more of a challenge. And of course, no one's faced this before. The closure of parks, the closure of museums, the closure of cafes, pubs, bars. I mean, we really are limited, and that does mean less exercise.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what you say about human interaction. I mean, nobody's asked me yet, but I'm going to tell you how I am anyway. One of the things that I've been finding this last week, it's quite intense, the highs and lows. It sort of comes in waves. It's not just good days and bad days. It's waves of things. And we bumped into somebody at the weekend. I mean, not literally, obviously, didn't literally bump into them, but we went for a walk in a park and saw a man who we know and had a chat with him. And I was like euphoric afterwards at this meeting somebody in real life, not organising it on Zoom or anything, and just having a fairly mundane conversation like you would have done before all this. I genuinely sort of felt quite euphoric after that. I was like, that's a bit weird because he's not, he's a nice man, but he's not, not the most exciting man. No offence to him.
Hopefully he's not
I don't know who is the most exciting man, having said that, but he certainly doesn't usually engender feelings of euphoria in me. How are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, good. I think I like what John says about the institutionalized bit about it. I was talking to my wife last night about it, and although she works pretty long hours usually and commutes into London, she admitted that she's quite missing that commute and that transition between being at work and being at home. Even when coming home is 9 o'clock at night and the early drinkers are talking loudly on their phones and God, why won't you shut up, sort of thing. That train journey and that separation isn't there. So she was kind of struggling a little bit with that. My son's really into his football. We go and see Crystal Palace every so often, and he's gone back to up the Palace. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I wasn't really a Palace man. I've lived locally for a while, but that's not my history or anything. But really enjoy going to the match. And we've been watching some Match of the Day reruns, and just seeing the people and the excitement and that sort of just that sheer energy. And we actually feature in one of the Match of the Days as kind of behind Roy Hodgson, which is a kind of an amazing moment. You watch those back, and you feel sort of wax lyrical about that sort of that opportunity to mix with other people and groups of people doing things collectively, which we don't really have other than standing outside our houses and clapping and banging saucepans at the moment. So it is, but that institutionalized bit of actually, I've almost got used to this in a weird kind of almost sad way, I think.
Yeah. What are you not missing, John? You said there's some things you're not missing.
Oh, traffic, aircraft. Do you know, the one thing I'm really surprised that I'm not missing, and he says as he's drinking a mojito, is going to
At 3 in the afternoon. Excellent work.
It's a bank holiday. I'll tell you in a minute why I'm drinking. But
I think we all know, John. I think we all know.
It tends to get to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
The pressure of being the nation's number one.
No, it's kind of the pub that I thought I would sort of miss being able to do that, but I'm not actually missing it. I'm sorry to all the publicans in the world and all the landlords, because you've entertained me a lot over the years, but I'm something I'm eating out even. I mean, we have got into the habit of maybe getting a takeaway meal at the weekends, which is something we would occasionally do anyway. But actually going and sitting down and eating and having to take something to entertain the kids and deal with kids who are misbehaving, actually it's quite a bit easier to feed them at home, even if you don't have to cook.
Yeah, that certainly fits. There's quite a bit of survey evidence already, isn't there, showing that people are not missing pubs and restaurants, which you might expect people to miss, but for whatever reason, that's not what they're missing. Is human interaction with their family and stuff, and pubs and restaurants comes quite down the list. But there you go, that's quite smooth, because that leads us on to, I'd suggest, onto feature number 1, which you have to imagine the music When I'm 64 by, I don't know, I mean, obviously by the Beatles. There's probably lots of other versions you could choose from, isn't there?
We're not going to sing. We're not singing this week, yeah.
No, I mean, obviously we can't afford to either sing it or steal it or rip it or whatever. So you just have to imagine the music. But the point of the feature is to look back, or to imagine looking back in 20 years' time at what we'll remember, or what our children will remember about this period. It's interesting you talk about pubs and restaurants, and who knows how that might manifest itself over the next few months or next few years, how that might change. Who's got ideas on what we're going to look back on and remember?
I've had a little trim. I know John's had his lockdown haircut. I think we're going to remember this as the summer of haircuts, or our children might remember us as the summer of haircuts, in a way that it's become this thing where we've all sort of, apart from potential opportunities for maybe for illicit barbers to operate under the radar in South London, then we have sort of embraced this sense of sort of almost, if we're channeling VE Day, which the day we're recording it on Friday, we're sort of channeling this kind of make, do, and mend. And actually, we're going to get the clippers out if we own them, or we get the scissors out, and we're going to try, and we're going to make the best of the situation. So I wonder whether that's one of the things that we'll remember. I've had a little trim. It was more to do with a practice for my son. My son definitely needs a haircut, but he said to Mummy quite sensibly, "Can you practice on Daddy first? No flies on him." so my wife has got the practice in on me first, and so we've had a little bit of trim. I feel it's made a big difference. So I wonder whether it's the summer of haircuts is how we'll remember this.
I feel that's slightly different. The thing I will take away from this actually is in a similar vein. Is being resourceful and just being happy with what you've got. And I would say that manifests itself from the supermarket shop, because the logistics are generally pretty good now, and you can generally go to shops and get what you want, apart from a few items, maybe like flour or eggs and things that do seem to ebb and flow. But my family will give me a list of stuff they want me to get when I trot off to the supermarket, and some of it I'm just I just have to say, look, you're going to get what you're given, and you'll be grateful. And I just buy what I can, sort of off the wish list, and get the essentials that you need. And if I can't get something, when it's tough, it's fascinating that, especially my youngest daughter, Izzy, she's taken, when I put up in the car, to running out to the car to see what I've got. It's suddenly become exciting to the kids. And I think, it's like we all had this mindset prior to lockdown happening. Well, maybe my wife and I are just a bit loose with money and so on. But, I want to cook a spaghetti bolognese. I've got no tomato puree. I'm just going to pop round the corner to the shops and go and buy some. When you can't do that, actually, you just make do with what you've got. And as we're talking about this on VE Day, I mean, brings back thoughts of rationing and so on, doesn't it? Which none of us are old enough to have experienced, but
Certainly not.
Is there? Ultimately, it'll be a simpler day. These are simple times, even simpler times. And I think, oddly, I'm going to look back at them quite fondly.
Is there a wider lesson there for for dads, not just lockdown dads, in that, a lot of, and Ian, you'll know about this with the people you work with, there's a lot of pressure to be the best dad, when actually, make do with what you've got in terms of your personality, your parenting skills, which are probably sufficient. You can't necessarily have, I don't know, some really fancy recipe for fair fatherhood. I can't think what a fancy recipe is. You'll just have to make do with a pasta bake of fatherhood. But that's perfectly filling. That works. Is there a wider lesson there, do you think, for dads during this period, that they're going to come out a bit more resourceful and more content, perhaps, in their parenting?
Yeah, I think it's sort of going back to sort of simpler way of existence, and I like John's analogy of this kind of celebration of bringing home the food. Almost, I mean, we want to move away from those sort of stereotypes in terms of me man going to go and kill a mammoth kind of idea, and actually we're hoping for society to move away from that kind of sort of maybe those kind of classic sort of divisions. But I think there is something quite simple about almost going out and foraging and going for a walk, because we're going to explore the local area in a way that maybe we've taken for granted, and we're going to do that, and keeping it simple really, and not worrying maybe too much about kind of the bigger things. We don't have things to spend money on particularly, and for some of that's great, because we appreciate that for a lot of people, then when if you're furloughed or if you're on reduced hours, or if you've lost your job altogether, then the fact that we don't have challenges in terms of spending, we don't have to compete with people perhaps in terms of spend or anything else. I think that, obviously there are difficulties at all being together, and I'm hoping that men are taking it as an opportunity both to keep it simple, but also to roll their sleeves up and get involved in the day-to-day in the house that maybe a lot of men don't experience. So I'd hope that is part of that sort of simplistic kind of looking into the family and kind of pulling together, another sort of analogy of sort of pulling together, I guess. I mean, what about you, James? What do you think if we look back on in when we're 64, what would stand out for you?
Well, I mean, purely because we're talking about supermarkets and stuff, I'll scrap what I was going to talk about and go with the cherry bakewell digestives. I mean, when you ask how I am definitely struggling with a new addiction to cherry bakewell flavored digestives. They put them right in the front of the supermarket. You go in and it's like, oh go on, then I'll have another packet of them this week. This is a new thing, and and they're amazing. I mean, I haven't tried the strawberries and cream one because they have, or the orange marmalade one, because why have marmalade? Why don't you have an orange one? But the cherry bakewell ones are amazing. I just think maybe in 20 years' time somebody will waft the smell of cherry bakewell under my nose, and I'm like, remember COVID and the cherry bakewell digestives, they were amazing. But I've got a more serious one for next week, but we've got limited time. But I don't know if this is for when I'm 64 or the next feature, which is when I'm 44, because that's only a few months away when we might look back at what's changed. But John, have you got some sort of major announcement that we might be looking back on in 20 years' time? Do you remember that time when John did that amazing thing with LinkedIn? Whatever it is, I don't know what it is.
It's possible. Well, actually, there are ways and means it is relevant to dads, but possibly not this discussion. Well, no, there is a relevant discussion. What am I saying? Yeah, so by the time this goes out, because this isn't going out before Monday, is it, guys? I have been selected by LinkedIn to be part of its Changemaker initiative. So there are a group of us who are all campaigning to change the modern workplace in one way or another. So there is one individual who is campaigning for mental health training in the workplace. There is a gay rights campaigner. There are a couple of diversity campaigners with different sort of causes that they are supporting. And myself, I am going to be campaigning hard for more flexible working to be made available to fathers, mothers, and more broadly carers. So that's going to be my campaign. And depending when this podcast goes out, you will see me on LinkedIn somewhere just before the lockdown videos and photo shoots and so on took place. But obviously I've had to keep that very quiet until now. Very exciting, really looking forward to it.
So, I mean, I think the next feature is when I'm 44, which is essentially what's going to change in the immediate future. How do you see the coronavirus crisis feeding into that agenda? Is there going to be space for that sort of stuff? Yeah,
massively, because we all know it. Over the past few weeks, and when you think about it, it is nearly 2 months. Working culture has just shifted hugely. Now, what we need to do is to make sure that's a permanent shift. Everyone who possibly can is now working from home, and I think there are various employers who were very reluctant, who just didn't feel that flexible or remote working was possible, and now their workforce is having to, and in many cases, having to balance that with homeschooling children. Now, that is a huge challenge, but if we remove homeschooling from the equation, which hopefully we will do in the months to come, a huge chunk of the workforce has proven that remote flexible working can be done, and it should be here to stay for the benefit of mums, dads, carers, and frankly, for employers. I can't quite figure out how this is going to hit employers in terms of their real estate. I think it's going to go one of two ways. Either they're going to get shot of a load of real estate because they no longer need to pay for it, so they can see their staff can work from home, or they're going to have to keep hold of the real estate they've got, but allow staff who can to work from home, but the office space would have to be socially distanced. So do you see what I mean? They're going to need the same space for half the number of people. So I can't quite figure out how it's going to go, but this is so on the agenda on so many policy areas now, and it could have a huge impact for dads who frankly, there are those who are crying out for flexible working who can't get it, and there are those who will be crying out for flexible working now they've actually done it.
I think it's really important. It's really exciting, and congratulations, John. I think it's really important that we recognise that there's a kind of a transition coming up. Is that taking homeschooling out of the equation is so important, I think, for flexible working for everyone. I mean, I know there's a lot of concerns because I spend time in Facebook groups, particularly Facebook groups dominated by professional women who I happen to be invited in there. And their concern is that businesses will start to open up, and their husband will be forced to go back to work, and they'll be left holding all of these elements of life that they've had plus homeschooling. And actually, in the short term, we have this challenge. We have an equality challenge ultimately, I think, and that's I think there's a transition period really. I don't know what you think, James.
Well, I'm going to turn it back on you because that's an interesting point then. So if we're going through this transition and businesses say, all right, lads, back to work, it's going to be on the men to say, nah, you're all right. I'm not coming back to work 5 days a week. I'm only coming back 3 days a week. And I'm going to work from home. Do we think, and I mean, well, both of you got the expertise here. Do we think men are going to stand up and say that? And particularly given the economic weather might be such that they may feel, yeah, whatever you say, boss, I just want to keep my job. I don't know. Do we think it's actually going to happen?
I hope so, but I think there's it's going to be, yeah, I see what Ian's doing in a way. I think we're not going to reach some we're not going to reach nirvana, basically, in the near term. I don't think. I certainly hope that this is going to be a ginormous step in the right direction, and certainly for those companies who are lawyered up, who have got sensible HR lawyers, who are, we can't really turn this request down, can we? Look, they're performing, doing everything they should be.
Yeah.
They did everything they did during the COVID-19 crisis. How can we turn this request down? So maybe the SMEs, I think, could be the real challenge. Or some of them. I mean, some of the tech startups and so on. They're probably not so much. But anyway, Ian, sorry.
Yeah, I think the experience that I've seen sort of personally in terms of my wife's business is the type of conversations that they're having is that even if we're inviting people to come back to the workplace, is it something we really want to do? Do we want our staff travelling around on public transport into London in a way that they maybe don't need to? Apparently it takes 2 days to get the air conditioning fired up to cool the entire building down. We've taken equipment home in order to remote work. Is it actually, in practical terms, is it too difficult to do yet? There'll be some jobs where absolutely businesses will want to be in there and getting their staff in and doing things. But I think in other businesses, it might be a pragmatic situation where we just wait. And this is, if we think about some of Churchill's words, this is the end. Maybe this is this isn't the beginning of the end of COVID. This is the end of the beginning in many ways. Is that we have a number of transitional periods of time. We may, when we're 44 and look back, this may just be the end of that initial phase, and then we're into these very these strange kind of midway until maybe a couple of 2 years down the line, we're back to what we might kind of see as being normal, or maybe just the new normal. But I think it's a long way to go yet. The great businesses will be great at doing this, and some of the other businesses might either struggle to do so, or culturally will just bury their head in the sand and not accept that the way that things are going in terms of flex and what people want and hopefully men will stand up for it, and they will take the opportunity and say, actually, this works. I can be more involved at home. I don't need to commute. Everyone's a winner here. We can do the work. We can do the outcomes. Why are we going back to the old way as if nothing's happened?
I think there's just to go a slight tangent there. I think that there is an issue with employees, the legal question, which you touched on there, Ian, which I think if an employee has an underlying health condition, and that could be as mild asthma, and their employer was with a cattle prod saying, right, come on, I want you back to the office. I think there's a massive legal issue here, which employers have got to seriously think about. If someone's job can be done from home, for an awful lot of people, it's probably in their interest to ensure they stay at home, because if they came to the office and got COVID at work.
Yeah. I was talking to an employment lawyer just before this all kicked off, before the lockdown began, and he was rubbing his hands. This is going to be good for business. Obviously he's not completely heartless, and he didn't want people to die or anything, but he could see that there was some business coming down the track off the back of this. I think key to this, really, isn't it, that essentially what we're saying is people like us, legends, leaders, pioneers like us, need to be out there, and people who are listening to this and watching it, and that is both mums and dads, need to be out there making the case. If we want this change to happen, as you say, there's a transition, and as Ian says with his, this doesn't work on the audio, but Ian's waving hand, Ian's waving hand, which is, I try and describe it going one way and the other. It's basically a half and half, could go either way sign. It could go either way, but people like us need to be out there making the case to make sure it goes the way we want it to go, and which will benefit most people, I think, if it does go that way. Which is all the better that John is now a LinkedIn champion.
I'm a LinkedIn change maker. Come follow me, change maker. Come follow me on LinkedIn and join in the conversations with the other mums, dads, and carers who are campaigning for change.
Look forward to seeing what change you make. Just one thing I'll mention before we move on, because there's not a huge amount to talk about at the moment, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's topical, is the research from Jasmine Kelland down at Plymouth Uni, who does a lot of stuff on dads, and we're supposed to be giving an excellent presentation, which involved a swear word. I can't remember what it was, but it was about fathers, so there was an F word in there somewhere. I can't remember the full title, but she's obviously not able to do that now. But she's been doing a survey into how parents are coping with lockdown, and it's certainly worth looking her up on Twitter or whatever. A lot of parents think this is going to be positive, which feeds into what we've just been saying. But the big alarm bell I noticed in it is that mums are reporting feeling very guilty that they're not able to give all their attention to their children in homeschool and all the rest of it. Dads don't seem to be noticing, which is a rather old pattern repeating itself. But hopefully, let's try and stay positive. That will not bear out. I think we're running out of time, aren't we, Ian? Before we get thrown off Zoom. So, should we talk about?
I made these.
Oh, well done.
I've been making face masks.
Brilliant.
I was about to ask, what are your tips for lockdown? Is that your tip, John? Is that your top tip? Making face masks?
Well, why not?
Very nice face mask.
Do you reckon? My prediction is that when Bojo does his great address to the nation tomorrow, which will be after broadcast, I know, but yeah. I think these are going to be. I reckon the government's going to say you've got to wear face masks. So I've been making them for the whole family with varying degrees of success.
Is that your lockdown tip?
Make face masks. Yeah. Also, do not leave your 10-year-old unsupervised with 4 different hair dyes in the bathroom, because that's partly why I was slightly late to getting here, because I had to strip down to my underwear and go over that entire bathroom with Jif. And we've got to buy a new toilet seat because it's just the dye won't come off it. It's just everywhere. It was like a goth massacre in that bathroom, frankly.
I'm tempted to go there. I don't understand why you had to strip to your underwear to clean the bath, because that doesn't seem too much of a problem. And
the bath? No. The bathroom. Okay, there's hair dye. And I'm wearing white. Sorry, for those who are listening and not watching, I'm wearing a white shirt. I'm actually wearing light-coloured linen trousers. If I'd gone in there fully clothed, I would have come out looking more colourful than your shirt, James.
What's your tip this week, Ian?
My tip is to get the kids involved in doing chores. So when they go and spread 4 types of hair dye all over the bathroom, that you don't just leave their long-suffering parents to clear it up. My daughter remarked quite correctly, it's like, what, we got to clean again? It's like, yeah, that was a week ago. This is clean. Thursday is cleaning day. She's like, it gets really dusty, I know. I said, like, yeah, we have a lovely lady called Leanna who usually comes, and we're paying her, and we've asked her not to come, and thought that was the right thing to do. But sort of involving the kids in that activity and and making it a team effort, I think, is really important. So they've got their little jobs, and my son doesn't like using the vacuum cleaner because it's a bit big and heavy really to maneuver, but he's really good at wiping things down. Once we've got away from actually don't really need to put a soaking wet kitchen towel on the PlayStation and the FreeSat box, thank you very much. It's like, Daddy will do the TV area. He's very good at kind of getting dust, and we've got our little routine, and that works quite nicely. Although, joking aside, I can't get them anywhere near the bathroom. So, I think that's a hard thing. But yeah, I think involving the kids in chores. I remember when I was 7, went on holiday to Dorset, to a place called Sandy Bay, and we were all in a caravan together. And that's when my parents brought out the fact that we are a family, therefore you can't just go and sit in the corner of the caravan or run around outside after lunch. You need to help clear up. And from then on, my brother and I used to take turns at doing the washing up. And that was our sort of post lunch kind of job for eternity. So I think so this is a great opportunity to get kids involved, I think.
When you said your son didn't like doing the hoovering, I was really hoping you were going to say, but he's really good at doing the chimney. He fits up there a treat.
Spin it. He's got so much hair. Spin him around, I reckon.
Yeah. Disappointing. Yeah, I got a professional tip this week. I can't remember. It was something daft. It was non-ironed shirts last week, wasn't it? Like this one. You see, you don't have to iron that. Come on, look at that pattern. More a professional tip, really, which is, and I think John might perhaps appreciate this one. Keep your hand in. I am furloughed, but I still need to be able to write stuff. I've sort of set myself a task to write 5 blog posts next week because, with homeschool and everything else, it's easy to sort of put down your own work, particularly if you've been furloughed. You're not allowed to do certain things with regard to your job. But we are going to be going back to work sometime. God knows when. But I think it's quite important to try and keep your hand in while you are furloughed, so that the transition back will be easier. So yeah, look out on my website for 5 blogs next week, including I've got the 5 titles. They are Sweden, the sewers, locking up grannies, what is Scotland, and there's another one which I've forgotten, which might end up being an actual published column. I think that's why I'm keeping that one back. But yeah, generally keep your hand in. I think is professionally it's worth doing, and you'll probably find that, John, that you've got to carve out time to keep blogging through this.
Oh yes, yeah, indeed. I'm indeed. But I'm intrigued. I want to know, what is Scotland?
Yeah, I might publish that one as well. It's more it's more lengthy.
I'm looking forward to hearing that one. See, my wife is quite funny because I put on the Scottish accent and she tries putting on a pretend Scottish accent as well. I've been working on this one for years.
Well, I said, what is Scotland, John? Not what's Wales. It's what is Scotland. not what is Jamaica. I don't understand. Sorry.
Yeah, what's all this about you being? What's all this about you being a Crystal Palace fan? I thought you were a Hibs fan.
I was back in the day. You can have it's got a wee team and a big team, Oh God, that's going to get the Hibs fans going mad. They're my big Scottish team. All right, I've got to have a big Scottish team and a wee Scottish team and a big English team and a wee English team. All right, that's allowed. Okay, is this in danger of degenerating into toxic masculinity? Talking about football and banter and all that sort of stuff. In which case, it might be time to wind it up, unless you have anything to add.
I would say thanks for having me on. I'm actually, it's timed very well because I'm at the end of my mojito now. I don't know how that is with toxic masculinity. But no, thank you. All good fun. And just stay safe, everyone, would be my message.
Well, thanks for joining us, John. Guest number 1. You'll always be our number 1. Next week's guest will always be our number 2. I know who it is as well. Yeah. You might not appreciate being referred to as our number 2, but there you go, he will be. So yeah, but we've got one lined up for next week already, so you can definitely come back next week for another episode if you've downloaded this or watched it or whatever. Ian, what do we need to do? Rate, review, all that sort of stuff?
Rate, review, subscribe, like, and go and visit John's site, and that is Dadblog UK. Have I got that right, John?
Dadbloguk.com. Yep.
Fantastic.
That's great, thank you.
And then and look out for John's appearance on LinkedIn as a change maker. So very exciting news, and we're all, all 3 of us are big fans of flexible working for everyone, and this is a massive opportunity, I think, is one of the conclusions from today's conversation. Although it is a transition, so good luck to all those dads out there who are doing their best, I think, really.
And if you want to do better, keep coming back, listening to these conversations, and we will try to help you to cope with this very strange situation. So yeah, rate, review, and come back next week.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.